Writing 421 for anyone that's writing fantasy with horses. We are trail riding. This is part of the Fullerton Loop. And if you've not ridden a horse before, it's a good idea to just look at how Fox here is kind of looking around. His ears are back because I'm talking, but also because we're the last in the line. And the horse that's at the last is listening for any threats or dangers behind the herd. If we were in the front, his ears would be pricked right forward. Horses are herd animals, they're also prey animals, and so they are thinking about that. That's their motivation. So Fox is about 15, so still in the prime. He's like a young adult. So he's looking at everything and checking out the trails. As we go up this little incline here, I will lean forward just a little bit to shift my weight. And it's a good point to understand that the rider in your fantasy story is not very passive. Riding is pretty active because you're thinking about the weight, how you are moving with the horse, how the horse is moving. I'm watching the trail, even as I'm speaking to you, to look for any hazards, like things that he would trip on or mud or slip on. So we're both actively working. Horses see to the side of them and not directly to the front, which is a good point to understand. So if you're writing a story where there's an ambush taking place, it's unlikely that the horse wouldn't know that there are people in the bushes. They're very tuned in to their surroundings, to the sounds, but especially the smells. Their vision is very good at night. They see well in the dark. That's another great point. You can see that we're just walking here. Majority of the time, if your characters are doing a long journey, they are going to be walking. They're not going to be able to gallop for all afternoon. They're also not going to be able to trot or canter endlessly. You will give your horse breaks. It is easier to do long distance trotting with some cantering in between, which is kind of that in between a gallop and a trot. But it's unlikely that you would do a full hard gallop for long. It's a big burst of energy and risky for your horse. So if you've got a character doing like a cross-country trip or traveling somewhere, they might be on trails like this. Horses can move through quite a narrow space. The packs would be on the back, so my pack is behind me. I've got saddlebags on. You wouldn't normally ride two to a horse, so you see that sometimes in film, but you wouldn't do it for long because it puts a lot of strain on their kidneys, which are to behind of me. I'm basically sitting right above his kidneys. You see, I'm not pulling on his mouth, so if you're writing about characters that are constantly pulling on the reins, it's actually unlikely that they would do that and the horse would start to fight it. He'd be tossing his head, he would be complaining. Most of the time I'm actually directing this horse with my leg, pressure, as well as pressure with the rein. I'm turning him right here a little bit and putting the reins on the side that I want to push. Fox is rein trained, which means that he responds really well to reins just being laid against his neck. I wouldn't pull on him to turn him. I would also, as I'm laying the rein against his neck, I'm pushing with that same leg, and I'm pushing him towards the direction that I want him to turn. But this section of the trail, it's pretty calm. There's not a whole lot of direction that's needed. My hands are on the reins, both of them, but I could probably ride one-handed, I might. I don't, because this trail has bicyclists and dogs, so I'm kind of keeping an eye out for that. Fox also has a bit of a tendency to run a little bit when he's nervous or startled. We're just keeping a pretty even, steady pace. You'll notice, too, that he's not making a ton of noise. So he's not snorting and whinnying. He will snort from time to time, but he's not calling out because he can see the other horses that we're with. If we were separated farther, he might call to them, but he knows these horses, they're part of his herd. So he would probably just do a lot of loud snorting. He's not whickering. That's not really something that they do when they're riding, because he's thinking about what he's doing. Another great point is that your character feeding the horse grain all the time is not going to happen. This ride, Fox won't need, we're out for about 3 hours. He's not going to need any extra special food. He's grazing on a lot of grass because it's summer. He has hay once a day. If he was out for most of the day, we would probably give him some grain or kibble. But in your fantasy store, there's not going to be kibble. And he is a little bit naughty, so if we were to stop, he would probably start pulling up the grass. I'm just coming a little bit downhill. If we come downhill, this isn't a very big downhill, but I'm leaning back just a little bit. Again, I'm shifting my weight towards the back to give him a bit more traction. There we go. He flips around a little bit. So another thing to keep in mind is that the horse does slip and trip and stumble just like we do. And if your character is a novice rider, that can actually be quite alarming to them. To be fair, it still alarms me from time to time. But there's a lot of movement that happens. Right? So with my movement, it's coming from the hip. But I'm not all over the place. If he wants to kind of trot up the hill, which I'll let him do. I'm just trotting to catch up a little bit. But I'm also not going to let him run. To that point, we might trot or canter a horse up a hill. But we don't do that coming downhill. So your horse isn't going to run or trot or gallop or anything down a hill. Only walk them down a hill because it's dangerous. They can flip. And while the horse will recover easily from stumbling and tripping, I'm on his back, and I don't want him to fall on me. That has happened to me once in the winter, and I can tell you that it's a pretty big impact when you come off a horse, especially if the horse lands on you like he did. So as you're riding your characters and you're thinking about the horseback riding that they're doing, you can think about those hazards. You can write them into your characters' experiences. We're not seeing any wildlife today. If we saw, for example, a bear, we would give them a wide berth because the horses would startle. Even though they're larger, because they're a prey animal, the horse is still going to be worried about it, and they would run. They can also be spooked by deer. Moose, absolutely. Other horses, they will sometimes react to that. Because we're out on this trail, and again, your fantasy story won't have it, but bicyclists are a problem. If your horse is inexperienced or not used to it, or if the bicyclist startles them. And again, even though we're bigger, the horse just doesn't think that way. They don't think about being bigger and stronger. They think about being prey, and their natural reaction is going to be to run. You'll notice that we're not riding side by side in this section because it's a single track. It's a little bit narrow. But we often will just ride in a straight line because it's safer. Horses also are kind of competitive with each other. They have a hierarchy within their herd, and so if you ride horses side by side, sometimes they'll kind of fight or jostle a little bit. That's pretty normal. Great views, though. Good points to think about is that if I was talking to the rider in front of me, I'd have to raise my voice for us to be heard. Not just because of the distance, but if we were closer together, I'd still be speaking a bit louder. Oftentimes, so if you have characters that need to have a good conversation, a great way to position that is if they're grooming. If you've got people standing and grooming horses at the end of a ride, it takes a little bit of time, and it's a calm time. And our tendency is often to sit and, well, not sit when we're working, is to talk. I'm kind of keeping an eye on the trail, which is why I'm losing my train of thought. We talk to each other, we're kind of gossipy, it's a calm time. Thinking about horse care, if your character has been riding any distance, any length of time, when they stop, they're not just going to tie up their horse and walk away. A rider will care for the horse first. And that means that you're going to be taking off the bridle, getting the bit out of their mouth, taking the saddle off, saddle blanket, and then you're going to groom them. And while we're grooming, we're checking their hooves, picking out stones. Horses wear shoes in the summer months, but often on this ranch we take the shoes off in the winter so that they don't slip on ice. So you're looking for stones and rocks and picking it out. You're checking for any nicks or scratches. This trail ride, it wouldn't be unusual for a horse to come back with some small nicks and cuts. It's a good example of Socks just snorting. This is a common behavior. It's normal. He's just, having a good time. Aren't ya? Trot a little bit to catch up. Also because he wants to catch up, and I'm going to let him. But in riding, we're going to direct the horse and tell them what we want them to do. He's relying on my direction along with his own desire. And that's another good point to think about, is that the horse is not a passive vehicle in your stories. Horses are thinking creatures. They have behaviors, but they also have moods and emotions. They feel things, they think about things, they're scared of things. Horses can be brave, they can be sweet, they can be all kinds of things. And it's not unusual for a rider to really bond with a horse and to have a strong relationship with them. I certainly do. Fox is one of my favorites. I ride him a lot, so I also know his behavior and I know his personality. I also know that he likes snacks a lot. He knows that I have carrots in my pocket, so every time we stop he turns around to give me a little look to see if he can have some. There you go. I hear he's breathing a little bit heavy. Maybe you can hear that. I can. I also get tired. Riding is hard work on your legs, also on your bum. If you have a person who hasn't ridden a lot before, they're going to be very sore when they're coming off a horse, and they'll be sore sitting on a horse as well. Up here we're coming for a break, so I'm going to dismount. I'm going to stop this video, and hopefully it's given you some insight into writing about people riding. There we go. I'm going to stop and dismount. Hold the reins in my hand. Turn my leg over.